morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.
But we're going to get things started this morning with conversations on CARICOM. So let's reach out and say good morning to His Excellency David Comissiong, Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Tisha. We want to focus this morning on the Association of Caribbean States. But before doing so, I feel that we need to reflect a little bit on this tremendous tragedy that has befallen the people of Guyana, and by extension, the people of our entire Caribbean community. Of course, I refer to the fire at the Madia Secondary School in Guyana that has claimed the lives of at least 20 young female students. Prime Minister Motley has already written to President Irfan Ali expressing the condolences of the people of Barbados and offering whatever assistance that Barbados can render to Guyana. I have done a similar thing at the ambassadorial level, and this tragedy brings into relief the importance of CARICOM, that at times like this, we are there collectively for any member state that has had this kind of tragedy. So I want to begin this morning by saying that our hearts go out to the people of Guyana, including those many Guyanese who are resident among us here in Barbados.
Indeed.
Yes, well, as I said, I really wanted us to focus on the Association of Caribbean States. I tend to talk a lot about CARICOM, and many Barbadians know that I am Barbados's ambassador to CARICOM. But I'm also Barbados's ambassador to the Association of Caribbean States, which is really the brainchild of CARICOM. It was CARICOM that established the Association of Caribbean States. And CARICOM's bright idea back in the early 1990s was that we needed an organization that brought into its fold all of the countries of Central America and Northern South America that border on the Caribbean Sea. And so we came up with this idea of a wider Association of Caribbean States. The headquarters is in Trinidad and Tobago, sorry. It is not as substantial an organization as CARICOM. It is set up on a less substantial basis. So, for example, CARICOM has all of these institutions, SEDIMA, CXC, CARFA, etc., etc. The Association of Caribbean States does not have institutions like that. But it brings all these countries of the greater Caribbean together to consult, to cooperate with each other. It has several directorates or departments at the headquarters in Trinidad and Tobago, whether dealing with trade, sustainable development, disaster risk reduction, and so forth. And then corresponding to all of these departments, it has special committees of member states and that correspond to these different departments and spheres of activity. So between the 8th and 12th, 2 weeks ago of May, the Association of Caribbean States had its big ministerial council meeting in Guatemala. That was followed by the big heads of government summit in Guatemala. In fact, we had a week of meetings, and I would just like to give a little report to the Barbadian people, because I did send in a report on the first day of that week, and I indicated that I would come back with a report on what was achieved during that week of meetings, Tisha.
All right, so tell us what happened at the ACS meeting. I know you've been pretty busy because there have indeed been quite a few meetings going on. You're freshly back from the foreign ministers meeting as well. I believe that was in Jamaica when we heard from you and got the report on that. So we're now talking about the ACS Council of Ministers meeting and Heads of Government Summit in Guatemala. Not sure if they were two separate events.
Yes, yes. The council, well, the ACS is really run by a council of ministers. So, member states of the ACS appoint a minister with responsibility. But the highest, above the ministers, the highest decision-making body is really the Summit of Heads of Government. But that only occurs, periodically. So it's the ministers who really run the association. But I can tell you that Barbados had a small delegation for those series of meetings, led by Minister Sandra Husbands, Minister with responsibility for foreign trade, myself, and Foreign Service Officer Disa Lewis. But I can tell you that the achievements were, well, first of all, we confirmed the 2022 to 28 work plan. We did the adoption of the Declaration of Antigua, Guatemala. That's the political declaration where the heads of government state the fundamental things that they're committed to. We identified some 13 concrete projects located within the work plan for which development partners have been identified. So those are the projects that will take forward the work plan. We did the elections to the executive boards of the association, and Barbados features on two. We went up for positions on two of those boards, and I'll just tell you what the executive boards are, because that gives you an idea of the structure and the work. So there's a ministerial council, and the ministerial council for the next year is going to be chaired by Suriname. So it's CARICOM's time to chair the ministerial council. Suriname was our candidate. Then there's the Special Committee on Sustainable Tourism. Barbados went up for the post of chairman of that special committee, and we were elected to that post. There's the Special Committee on Disaster Reduction. Barbados went up for the post of vice chair, along with Guyana, two vice chairs, and we were elected to that position. That committee will be chaired by Mexico. There's the Special Committee on Transport, chaired by Martinique. Special Committee on Trade Development, chaired by Colombia. Special Committee on Budget and Administration, that will be chaired by Suriname. Special Committee on Cooperation and Resource Mobilization, chaired by Costa Rica. And then there is the Caribbean Sea Commission, which will be chaired by Cuba. And we are likely to collaborate a lot with Cuba on this, because the Caribbean Sea Commission has responsibility for the preservation and the sustainable development of the Caribbean Sea. And since we have responsibility for sustainable development, the two things really go together. Some other important work done was we looked at the budget and the financing of the ACS. The ACS has a perennial problem with budget deficits. As I said, it's not a very big organization. The annual budget is approximately 2.2 million US dollars every year, and that's split among 25 member states and several associate member states. But it does have a perennial deficit problem. And one of the things that the Barbados delegation did at this recent meeting, we proposed to the ACS that perhaps they should attempt to put in place the CARICOM model of financing. The way CARICOM finances its operations is that the majority of the budget comes from the contributions of member states, but there's a minority section of the budget that actually comes from the contributions of donor partners. So we said to the ACS, why don't you search out some donor partners that could help to supplement the contributions of member states? And that was accepted and has been taken on board. We also, at these meetings, we admitted into observer status the Latin American Development Bank. So they will become a kind of observer organization of the association, and we admitted into social partner status the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile, the Catholic University of Chile. So those were some of the, I would say those were the broad achievements. I would have mentioned that that Barbados is going to be paying a lot of attention to the Bridgetown initiative at that conference, and indeed that is precisely what we did. We put the Bridgetown initiative into the declaration, and I'll quote to you the paragraph that we put in. And this is the paragraph. It says, heads of state and heads of government of the Association of Caribbean States emphasize the imperative of developing a more just, inclusive, and supportive international financial system. And in that context, welcome the Bridgetown Initiative proposed by the government of Barbados as a plan with the potential to significantly redesign the global financial system in order to improve the response to climate crises and to development challenges, thus allowing developing countries in particular to have the fiscal space in order to work towards achieving the sustainable development goals. So our minister, when she spoke, her speech focused a lot on explaining the Bridgetown Initiative and calling upon all of the countries of the Association of Caribbean States to rally behind the Bridgetown Initiative, to promote it, to agitate for it at all of the major international meetings that will be happening this year. Barbados also took the initiative of placing into the declaration of the Association of Caribbean States a call for Cuba to be removed from the US's list of unilaterally imposed list of countries that support terrorism. A really ridiculous thing that the Trump administration did, and we continue to give solidarity with Cuba on this and to call for the removal from the list.
All right,
The
let's
other thing
double
I
back for a moment. Let's double back to a moment for a moment to the Bridgetown Initiative. You talked about Minister Husbands urging Caribbean leaders to support the initiative. How has it been received by Caribbean leaders? What are their feeling generally on the Bridgetown Initiative and how it could benefit the region?
Oh, it's just gaining traction wherever it is being introduced. I think everybody is recognizing that this is the real thing. This is what we have been looking. This kind of project is what we have been searching for a long time. A project that kind of pulls together all of the demands pertaining to the climate crisis, but also to development, to that whole international financial system. And it has dovetailed all of these ideas and made them one coherent whole. And so the Bridgetown Initiative is helping us to see the inequalities and the injustices and the inefficiencies in the system, also to see the interconnectedness, not only between all these issues, but the interconnectedness between all nations and people that inhabit this planet. So the Secretary General of the ACS, Adolfo Sabong, he stressed the Bridgetown Initiative in his speech. The new chair of Suriname, the Foreign Minister of Suriname. I mean, so we heard the word Bridgetown Initiative resound throughout that conference, and so again, I think it's so important that Barbadians be aware that we played a very important role. It's not just a Barbados initiative, but it was crafted right here in Barbados, and it does bear the imprint of some of the Prime Minister Motley, Professor Avinash Prasad, and Prasad and other Barbadian thinkers and policymakers, and we're going to be pushing really hard to get this thing implemented for the benefit of all, not just Barbados, all developing countries, and ultimately for the benefit of the Earth's climate, and to keep that temperature rise to no more than 1.5 degrees increase by the end of this century. The only other thing I could add, Tisha, is that we did identify the various projects that through which we will articulate the work plan. And I mean, these deal from transport, maritime transport, looking at the possibility of a ferry system for the Greater Caribbean. How do we preserve the reefs? How do we regenerate the coral reefs of the Caribbean? Digitization of the Greater Caribbean, maritime transports, a maritime transport and logistics strategy for the Greater Caribbean, trade. How do we strengthen trade? How do we put in place the Caribbean Sea as a special sustainable development zone? The Sargassum crisis. That was a big item at the conference. Many member states maintaining that the Sargassum problem is now at the level of a crisis or an emergency, and we need to draw the world's attention to this. Meanwhile, we are developing a project led primarily by Guadeloupe and by the Caribbean Sea Commission to look at how, from a scientific level, how do we deal with this Sargassum invasion. So Barbados will take responsibility as chair of the Special Committee on Sustainable Development. There are a number of projects having to do with sustainable development, and we will have some responsibility over the next year in managing and leading that process.
Wow, well, congratulations on that. And coming up here on TVA, actually coming out of many of the interviews that we've done here on Morning Barbados, we are looking at some of the effects of climate change directly and indirectly as relates to what we're seeing with the sargassum seaweed, with the Sahara dust, what we're experiencing with the increased presence of mosquito-borne illnesses here in Barbados, and other such things that obviously are directly or sometimes indirectly related to the matters of climate change. So congratulations on ascending to that place within the ACS, and we most certainly believe that you will continue to share the most on all of the topics that are truly relevant to not only Barbados but the region. So again, congratulations, and we'd like to thank you for coming through all the time and sharing. I'm a little curious about something that's not necessarily on the agenda, but that most certainly has been coming up quite a lot. I'm interested to find out the place that intra-regional travel takes in many of these meetings, because it feels as though we talk about intra-regional travel so much, but there are no, pardon the pun, inroads a lot of the times in terms of whether it's reasonably cost flights. I heard you mention the ferry service a moment ago, and we never feel like there's anything truly happening in terms of travel. I would love to be able to jump on a ferry or just be able to get on a flight that is reasonably priced and move across the Caribbean region. And there's so many of the people who I know would love that as well. So it feels sometimes like it's strictly lip service, and then we don't see anything happening. So what place does travel take, intra-regional travel specifically, in these meetings?
No, well, every meeting is definitely concerned with intra-regional travel. To some extent, we only have ourselves to blame, because we have airlines that we have not nurtured the way we should have. Look, we had Liat. Look what we did to Liat, and several member states really did not support Liat in the way that they really should. Barbados and St. Vincent, especially, were left carrying most of the burden. And we had the Caribbean Shipping Corporation. We had two ships. Um, we failed to nurture and preserve that um, CARICOM shipping company, and now we are we are now scrambling to see how we can put maritime transportation. We can build it up. We are looking at a ferry service. So these are things both CARICOM and the ACS is grappling with these matters. We felt in CARICOM that we were going to make rapid progress in putting the a ferry system in place, but we knew that we needed private sector investment. But the COVID came along, and COVID kind of disrupted a lot of the efforts that were being made. But the efforts are still on track to deliver a ferry service to CARICOM member states. As you heard from what I read out, the ACS also has a project, and there were representatives. There were representatives from the World Bank and the Inter-American Development Bank at the meetings in Guatemala, speaking directly to this issue of maritime transportation in the greater Caribbean and the possibilities of a ferry service. So these are things that are being worked on, Tisha. But they're very difficult issues because whether you talk a ferry service, you talk a new regional airline, they're going to call for major investment at a time when our governments are really cash strapped. Our governments coming out of the COVID are dealing with debt, but everybody recognizes it's a crisis. I mean, for us to go to Jamaica from Barbados, we had to go through Miami, and from Miami then to Jamaica. You spend a whole day traveling just to get from one CARICOM country to another. So that is really untenable. But I can assure you that it is on the minds of all of our governmental policy workers, and they are actively working on it. But it is about identifying private sector investment that is willing to come and help lift hold up some of that financial weight.
Yeah, I certainly hope that I think it's time for us to shift conversations on CARICOM to its own presentation. There's so much to talk about when we talk about CARICOM and all that's happening across the region. I mean, in conversations with the airlines themselves, many of them have said over the years that their fees weren't really the problem that made the fees to travel across the region so high. They've said it's the fees that are put out by the various countries that really pushed up the cost of travel and things of that nature. So, I mean, there's so much for us to get to. But we certainly appreciate you reporting to us what's happening across the region and how you are representing for Barbados and the region. Exactly where you started is where we'd like to leave this conversation, with our thoughts and prayers going out to our Guyanese friends and neighbors at this time, particularly the Guyanese who are here in Barbados, and by extension, family in Guyana. It truly is a heart-wrenching situation that has happened.
Yes. Thank you. I agree. We should end on that note. Our deepest sympathy and solidarity with the people of Guyana.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Comissiong. Always wonderful to speak with you. And of course, we have conversations on CARICOM each and every Tuesday morning right here on Morning Barbados.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning.